Last year, Yu-Gi-Oh! Celebrated its 25th anniversary, reminding me and all other millennials that we basically have one foot in the Shadow Realm.
It's not fair!
I'm kidding, of course. But to keep the celebration going, this past weekend, Konami released the highly anticipated Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days collection. Now, as an avid fan of the anime growing up, and now, of course, but with no actual knowledge of the modern state of the game, I'm looking at you, Master Duel, a collection of 14 games from the early history of the card game, before Pot of Greed was banned, sounded like it was right up my alley. And for the most part, the game was almost perfect. As I mentioned previously, the Early Days collection offers 14 different titles, ranging from the original Japanese exclusive Duel Monsters games that have now for the first time been localized into English, to the Game Boy Advance World Championship Tournament games. The earlier games, apart from the Monsters capsule title, which allows players to basically play out the virtual world arc from the original anime, and Dungeon Dice Monsters title, which allows players to try their luck at Duke Devlin's game, serve as a great retrospective look at how quickly the card game was developing in its earlier years, with most of the titles being interchangeable for the most part, aside from a few rule changes, new cards, or other mechanics such as adding a new zone, or even a new deck in the case of Duel Monsters 4. Seems very Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green to me. Maybe Pokemon should take some notes from Yu-Gi-Oh! And release their own version of an Early Days collection. Wink wink, hint hint. Speaking of Pokemon, if you like this video and you also happen to like Pokemon, it would really mean a lot to me if you were to hit those super effective like and subscribe buttons so that you can continue to see more of my content and let me know that you like videos like this so that I can make more of them. The game also added a few quality of life updates that, in my opinion, are best taken advantage of from Duel Monsters 4 and beyond, as the game essentially works as a built-in emulator, allowing you to use quote-unquote cheats like unlocking all of the cards for a specific game, bypassing the password/point system. I myself took advantage of this in Stairway to the Destined Duel after realizing how bad the in-game given deck actually was. They've also included a rewind function that allows you to rewind the game up to 1 minute to fix any mistakes, as well as online dueling. However, this feature is currently only supported by Duel Monsters 4. Other things like choosing to have borders, fitting the screen to a specific size, changing the colors of the game to match their original given console colors, changing the language of the game, and manuals for each game to reference as you learn to play some of the more complicated games are also available as well. But with these updates and nostalgia coursing through my veins, I was happy, for the most part. Although the game added many quality of life updates, there are a few little things that could have made this game go from good to great. A big one being customization. As this game aims to blend the worlds of retro gaming and modern gaming, one feature that the game would greatly benefit from is different options for customization, especially when it comes to background customization in duels. For example, Eternal Duelist Soul has a brown moving background. It doesn't look great and can irritate players' eyes as they play through the game. Being able to change this to a different color or even just a static background would be an easy upgrade that would greatly improve the player experience. Other simple options for customization for things like card sleeves to help make the player's deck feel more unique, changing how your character looks in certain games such as World Championships 2005, or even the option to choose a different gender would help bridge this gap between old and new. Keeping with that same theme, as I mentioned earlier, the game essentially functions as an emulator. However, unlike an emulator, there is currently no way to speed up the game without having to constantly hold down a button. Adding this as an additional option on the menu page would be a great addition for games like World Championships 2004, which would have been one of the best games in the collection if it wasn't so slow and require a manual speed-up option. Another modern feature that could be improved is the online support for the Game Boy Advance games. Currently, only Duel Monsters 4 has access to online features. Adding online support to games like Eternal Duelist Soul, Stairway to the Destined Duel, World Championships 2004, and World Championships 2005 would greatly incentivize players to continue playing the games even after completing the campaigns for the titles. This is also true for online trading features, as many of the games require trading for certain cards. Yes, there is the unlock all cards feature that I mentioned earlier, but this is a trading card game, after all. So I'm sure that some players would rather be able to connect with their friends and trade manually. Another point that I had mentioned earlier is that many of the games in this collection are almost interchangeable. For example, Stairway to the Destined Duel and Duel Monsters 2 Expert 6 are almost identical games. And technically speaking, they are the same game, just one was released in Japan and one was released here in the States. But unlike the other games that were translated into English, where you could simply change the language of the game from the menu, these are two completely separate games, insinuating that the games should be played separately as their own individual games. However, Stairway to the Destined Duel is missing a significant amount of card content, and considering that Duel Monsters 2 Expert 6 was not officially translated and is therefore not accessible to play for those that don't speak Japanese, adding in the missing cards to Stairway to the Destined Duel would make it a true reiteration of the original game and allow English-speaking players to enjoy the same content as Japanese-speaking players. The last thing that the Early Days collection would benefit from is DLC expansions. This would be an opportunity to update the games and give players a reason outside of the aforementioned online support to continue to play the new collection versus, say, the old cartridges on the original consoles. Things included in the DLC expansions could be old cards from the past that were never included, other games, or even just making certain cards that are obtainable in the games usable. A prime example of this would be the Egyptian god cards in Eternal Duelist Soul. Currently, the game allows you to unlock the cards but doesn't allow you to actually use the cards in the game. So updating that would be a great way to keep audiences engaged, or really just any other content to keep the games fresh for new and old audiences. Feel free to leave any of your ideas on how they could keep the games fresh in the comments. But overall, the game is a great start to what could be a revolutionary bridge between the past and present Yu-Gi-Oh franchise, and with just a few minor improvements, could be one of the best ways to immortalize one of the most successful franchises in the world.